The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 61. Not a bad size. At this point, over 10 people had already died and it was unclear whether the murderer was a human or a ghost. The common folk believed that this was a punishment from the river gods and were all terrified senseless. Even Magistrate he was influenced by it, but Tang Fan and the rest were standing at an investigative viewpoint. They would not think about things from that perspective, else the case would never get looked into at all, were they to directly report to the court that the supernatural was afoot. They also didn't want to lose the black hats on their heads, of course. Since there were thieves' caves at the imperial tombs, this is surely related to grave robbers, Tang Fan said. Has not even one thief been caught, after all this time? After the incident with the former village chief, no one dares to go over there at night anymore, Magistrate he answered. This humble official once brought several people along to check all around the thief burrows and tombs during the daytime, but nothing was discovered. No one wanted to descend the caves at first, so I had no choice but to put out a monetary reward, as only then would a few willingly went down. However, they came back up not long after, saying that the caves had been dug too deeply, and went all the way down into pitch-black darkness. They couldn't see where they were going, nor where anything led to, so they were too afraid to go further in. After that, I brought up compensation a few more times, and some still were willing to search, but... He mumbled for a bit, then finally said, but they never came back up. The lively mood of the dinner gradually cooled down. Everyone was shaken by what the magistrate was telling. Those details was written about in the memorials that was presented, but Tang Fan could understand why. These events were ultimately much too strange and would have been difficult to clearly describe in a few written words, since memorials required the use of concise phrasing. There was no way every little thing could have been jotted down in it. Still, they had all come from the faraway capital to investigate this, so they definitely needed to find the truth, for truth's sake. It was simply that according to Magistrate He's words this case was complex and dangerous, which likely far exceeded their original expectations. Even Yin Yuanhua, who had deliberately planned to come and steal the credit, was having some regrets at his own insistence. Magistrate he looked at Tang Fan with anxiety, fearing that he would reproach him for not writing all this clearly in the memorial. It was only after he saw that the other didn't have any intention to blame him that he relaxed a little. The very next instant, he heard him ask, "How far is Luo River village from here?" "Not far, only about 10 li out from the county capital." "As that's so, we'll head over once we're done eating, and simply spend the night there." Magistrate he was completely dumbstruck. What is it?" The magistrate snapped out of it. That won't do, is all. The village is simple and I'm afraid that it will fall short of your preferences. Moreover, in the middle of nights. That is precisely the reason, Tang Fan intercepted. Did you not say that the whaling started up again recently? We're just in time to go over for a look and see what divinity is actually there, then. Would we even be able to find anything during the day, otherwise? He then looked at Suizhou. What's your view on this, brother Guangchuan? The other nodded. Sir Tang's words ring true. We brothers of the Jinyue have no comment. Of course, the Jinyue wouldn't have any comments. None of this had been too grueling thus far, as hurrying on during the daytime and sleeping late at night was typical for them when they were on out-of-town assignments, in their opinions. When Suizhou had investigated Huang Jinglong's case, things had been way harder than this, as they had needed to keep away from their target's eyes and ears, hide in the day and come out in the night, and travel at double speed on their journeys. For the civil officials, however, this was a bit unbearable. For Yin Yuanhua, it was especially so. Upon hearing this, he more or less wanted to pass out and die. "Sir, we've only just arrived. Let us rest for a night here. Speaking more on this tomorrow wouldn't be too late for it, yes." Tang Fan was a benevolent boss. "Since you don't have the sufficient strength, Brother Yin, you can just rest in the city. I will go with the assistant envoys group. Yan Yuan, who had suffered through a lot to go from the capital to Gong County. Was that not to steal the credit and snatch some blackmail material on Tang Fan while he was at it? If he wouldn't be allowed to participate in the investigation, then what would be the point of him staking everything to come here? He knew that Tang Fan very clearly didn't want to let him come with them, even throwing sarcastic remarks at him. He thus had no choice but to force a smile. How could I do that? This humble official has my duties, so what reason would there be in making you forge on ahead by yourself, sir? Please allow me to come with you. If you're not feeling well, don't force yourself, Tang Fan answered amicably. Recovering from your sickness is important. I can handle everything. You're the sick one. Your entire family is sick. Yan Yuanhua was about to crack his teeth open while obliged to show a moved expression. You may have empathy, but how could I let you face danger alone with peace of mind? I will be more at ease accompanying you. Seeing that he was persistent about it, Tang Fan nodded. It's up to you, then. Pay attention to your own self, and if you can't go on any more, let me know. Magistrate, he knew nothing about the clash between these two, thinking about how Master Yin was indeed an imperial ambassador from the capital. To stake it all like this, he had thrown up so hard, yet was still solely focused on his assignment. With Yan Yuanhua being insistent on coming with them, what reason would there be for the two clerks, Chenghua and Tianxian, not to? The whole group had eaten their fill and now headed for Loto River village under the magistrate's directions. The county deputies group took the preemptive step in getting lodging ready for these gentlemen. The village was ultimately inferior to the city, and with these many people charging into it, they weren't even sure if there was enough space that could be vacated on their behalf. The distance between the city and the village wasn't far, so no one took their horses, switching them out for litters. The guard steeds were left in the post-house's care, deserving of a nice break for coming out this far. The feeling of being in a litter differed from riding a horse. Sitting atop a thick, soft cushion with a sway beneath his body, Tang Fan was so comfortable, he nearly dozed off. Actually, he did doze off. And he slept until someone gently patted him awake. We're here, Sui Zhou said to him, upper half leaning into the litter. This was a public area, in the end, and Yan Yuanhua and the rest were here. It would be bad for them to be too blatant in showing off their friendship, so even the way they spoke to each other had to be within standards. Tang Fan smiled at him, stretching his back. He felt a little more energetic, but his physical exhaustion had only become all the more apparent, which made him itch to fall back asleep. Forcefully restraining this desire, the second he stepped off the litter, he was the energetic imperial ambassador once more. This assignment was not only a major make-or-break point for his personal career path but also related to the paths of wealth and promotion for others. As the lead envoy, he had to take all those below him into consideration, and not act too arbitrarily. Like tonight, for example, leaving aside those like Yan Yuanhua, who were in a pit of carriage sickness misery, the Jinyue like Peng Qi were eager to establish merits, and really looked forward to coming over here and checking things out immediately. Sui Zhou could curtail them, but after thinking about this from the other's standpoint, Tang Fan didn't want to make things harder for him. At this time, night was just descending, the sky not entirely darkened yet. Beneath its gray-blue color, everyone took in the sight of the Loto River village at last. It wasn't a big place, but it also wasn't that small. As it was both close to Gong County and positioned along the edge of the Loto River. Many residents of the city originated from here, too. All the comings and goings smoothed out the roads here, resulting it being comparatively prosperous. Still, villages were villages. There was no way it could have a glamorous post house like the city did, which resulted in the county deputy coming over to report with a face full of embarrassment. Ambassadors, this is a crude village inferior to the city. It was hard to find many houses. I barely managed to gather up a few for your temporary use to rest in, but, in this way, I'm afraid you'll all need to be wronged with sharing. How do you see this? The houses had been emptied hastily after the deputy had asked a few villagers to go stay with their neighbors or relatives. Tang Fan, obviously, had no opinion on this. How many houses are there in total? 9. I specially arranged them so that they're all linked together. Thank you for your hard work, Tang Fan praised. That'll do, then. The deputy had been worried about getting reprimanded, yet received commendation instead. He was pretty much over the moon. I'll share one with Guangchuan. Brother Yin, Chengwen, and Tianxian will be together. The rest of you will pair up according to Guangchuan's orders. Suizhou took the Jinyue to allocate them into the remaining 7 houses. Some were bigger, and some smaller. Tang Fan and Suizhou shared everything normally, making staying in a small room and sharing a bed to sleep in to be no big deal. No one had come here to have fun, anyways, so cramming in together would be fine. The trio of Yin Yuanhua and the 2 clerks were given a big house, which had an inner and an outer room. Yin Yuanhua got the inner room to sleep in, and the clerks got the outer room. The guards were much easier to arrange for. They were all hardened men, and when given a spot and a blanket, they could sleep wherever, less picky when out of their own homes. If you aren't in a rush to get back, you may as well take us to visit the former village chief, Tang Fan said to Magistrate He, once the homes were divided up. He saw that the other was hesitating though, and kept stopping himself from speaking. Is there a problem with that? Magistrate He smiled painfully. It isn't that I'm intentionally beating around the bush, sir. After he pulled through that previous fright, the village chief will appear to be just fine in normal times, but whenever anyone brings up the events of that night, he'll just babble the same words over and over again to the point where nothing can be asked out of him. Also what? It's soon about to be night. Why not do it tomorrow? As soon as the man said this, Tang Fan then noticed that it was not only him, but even the deputy's group looked fearful. Previously, Magistrate He had sworn that only commoners believed in the supernatural acting up, but his current hesitation showed that he, too, had apprehensions. Not far away, the sound of Luo River's water gurgled past, heading straight towards the Yellow River in the northeast. It wasn't as violently churning as the latter, but it still flowed in a rapid torrent, its surface wide enough for boats to sail on it, some vegetation on either side of its shores. Looking at it during daytime would certainly give a nice view of lush greenery and low-hanging mist, but it was too late for that now. Everything was dark, the attacking evening wind making it much colder than the day. Those wearing less would involuntarily shudder. This river right in front of them didn't look in any way like it had swallowed up so many people, but Tang Fan might have gotten infected by the emotions of the magistrate and them. When he viewed it from a high distance, he felt that beneath its rolling water, there might be many hardly known dangers hidden deep within. As the others were this nervous, he didn't force them. Very well. Point the way to the village chief's residence, leave a few people behind that are familiar with the terrain to guide us, then return home. Magistrate He was indeed a bit scared, so he looked at the deputy. The latter was contrarily of the mind to curry favor with these ambassadors, and thus volunteered on his own. This humble official is willing to stay and show you all the way. Since the deputy was willing, the magistrate got antsy. He left a further 2 bailiffs behind for orders, after which he apologized and bid farewell to Tang Fan's group, got in a litter and hurried off. Magistrate He did things overcautiously and indecisively. Were he an ordinary person, that would have been fine, but he was an appointed court official. He should have taken at least some responsibility, even if only for his own prospects, but since he refused to go all out, he was destined to never go far in his career. Even so, Tang Fan did not admonish him. The most important thing right now was to investigate the case, which the magistrate had little connection with. Him staying behind wouldn't have made any difference. In contrast, County Deputy Zhao was more enthusiastic. Following his introduction, Tang Fan's group learned that the current chief of the village was the former village chief's son, because the old village chief had always been prestigious and willing to put himself out there for the villagers' sake, yet had met with such a mishap. Everyone had elected for his eldest son to be the new village chief. The old village chief now lived with that son. Under Deputy Zhao's guidance, they arrived at the village chief's home. The village chief had already heard that major figures had arrived in the county, but he hadn't dared to rashly come out and bother them without Magistrate's orders. Now that he was seeing the imperial ambassadors arrive in person, he hurriedly went to welcome them while the neighbors all became alarmed. This typically serene village turning to chaos for a good burst of time. His tiny house couldn't accommodate too many people inside it, so Tang Fan had Peng Qi keep watch outside with the others whilst he himself entered with Suizhou, Yin Yuanhua, and the clerks. The old village chief's eldest son was currently over 40, with the surname Lu. He was a down-to-earth and honest fellow. Once he heard Tang Fan's intent in coming there, he went in and asked the old village chief to come out, then bowed in humble apology to them all. My father is currently a bit disorganized in speech. At times, he cannot be heard clearly. Please do not blame him, lords. You don't need to fret, Tang Fan said warmly. We'll simply ask a few things, then leave, though I'm afraid we'll be a bother here for a few days more. Village Chief Lu was presumably a bit experienced, as though he was fearfully respectful, his words didn't lack in manners. He smiled good-naturedly. It is this village chief's honor that you noblemen grace us. How could you ever be a bother? This village is too crude, so I'm afraid that it's you all who will be wronged. While they spoke, the old village chief was listening nearby. He seemed placid, hands slowly rubbing together, and looked no different from an ordinary person, but when Tang Fan brought up that one night, his expression suddenly went a little disturbed. Body slightly trembling, his mouth opened and closed, as if he wanted to say something. Adi, this is the high official that the court sent to investigate the case, Village Chief Lu said to him. Can you tell these gentlemen what actually happened that night, now? The old village chief shook his head over and over again. I can't. I can't. Divine wrath will come. Don't be afraid, Adi. These officials are all celestial messengers that ghosts don't dare to get near to. Didn't you say that you saw river gods? What happened? The man sighed. Noble lords, it isn't that this little old man refuses to speak, but that I really don't want to watch all of you go to your deaths. On that night, I clearly saw gods come out of the river. The few that went to dig out the tombs got dragged in all at once, with not even bones left behind. That part of the story had not been mentioned by Magistrate He. You all saw robbers beforehand? The old chief nodded. Yes. They were carrying shovels to go dig up graves, and when we ran into them, they tried to escape, so we chased them all the way to the river's edge, and then, recalling the situation from that night, he appeared to be ensnared with fear, shortly becoming incoherent again. And then we ran into ghosts. There were ghosts, so many ghosts. Look at that. He had just said it had been river gods, and now he was back to saying it had been ghosts. Tang Fan, Suizhou, and the rest of them exchanged looks. Adi, what are you even talking about? Village Chief Lu had to say. The old man shivered, face contorting like he had seen something unbelievably awful. As he shook his head, he shrank his entire body into the corner, tears rolling down from his turbid eyes. Liu's little six had half of his body bitten off. His upper half was still on the shore, digging in with his fingernails as he laid on his stomach, crying and shouting constantly, asking us to save him. Bailiff Joe ran over, grabbed his hand, and tried to pull him up, but if it wasn't for me catching him, he would have been dragged down, too. Then, we all saw that there was something in the river. What was it? Tang Fan chased. River gods? The river gods. He felt like there was no being serious with an elder like this. Just as the magistrate had said, everything that came out of his mouth was disjointed. The first halves of his sentences might be fairly organized, but the half after would be rubbish again, making it hard to tell truth from fiction. As they already weren't getting anything out of him, Tang Fan turned to Suizhou. "Do you have anything you want to ask, brother Guangchuan?" The other lightly shook his head. Yin Yuanhua was the one to want to ask something different from the crowd. "Did you see what the river gods looked like?" The old chief paused a bit and then his teeth chattered. Village Chief Lu quickly stepped forward to support him. "Adi, what's wrong with you?" he asked, worried. Unexpectedly, the old man just started trembling all the more violently, suddenly pushing Village Chief Liu's hand away and shrinking straight into the corner of the Kong. Helpless, Village Chief Lu had to plead with Tang Fan. "Sir, with my father like this, there's really nothing he'll be able to say. Can you ask again later?" Sensing his own loss of face, Yin Yuanhua couldn't help but glare at the old guy, and yet, he happened to see the other's head raise, the terror and desperation in that gaze reaching to the extreme, and within them, a plea. It made him feel cold all over, and he promptly refused to lock eyes with him, shifting his line of sight away. Tang Fan got up, told Village Chief Lu to look after his father well, then left with everyone else. Behind him, the old village chief muttered to himself. "Don't go, don't ever go, there's ghosts there, ghosts, so many ghosts, ghosts all over the place." Tang Fan couldn't resist glancing back, but the old man had since lowered his head, skull leaning against the wall. He didn't spare them a glance. Once outside of the Lu home, it was still the same Shishan. Tang Fan ordered everyone to return to their respective houses that had been temporarily vacated for them and get ready for sleep. Speaking of, Deputy Zhao was indeed much more considerate than Magistrate He, having even prepared hot water and face cloths. Out of fear of not being attentive enough, while Tang Fan and the others had gone to the Lius for questioning, he'd had people go buy some treats from the city to bring over. Now, the pot of tea on the table was still piping hot. The tea set was simple, but as soon as the aroma hit Tang Fan's nose, he could tell that this was good, authentic tea. Magistrate He feared death and insisted upon going back ahead of time, yet Deputy Zhao stayed behind on his own initiative. His consideration and thoughtfulness are as different as the sky and the ground. Tang Fan shook his head, pouring cups of tea for Suizhou and himself. "He's only wanting you to put in a few good words for him when you get back. Everyone wants to advance in life. Likely no one wants to be a county deputy all their lives." Suizhou spread out the clean bandages he had taken from Peng Qi, applying the ointment to them that he himself had brought. "Come here." Glimpsing the stuff in his hand, Tang Fan couldn't help but laugh dryly. "I've been bandaged for so many days, don't you know? They should be pretty much fine by now. There's no need to wrap them up again, since it's so awkward. I told you to come here, so come here." Suizhou was cold-faced. "Shouldn't you know whether they're fine or not?" They weren't fine, of course. Tang Fan could only look defeated as he slowly walked on over. "Lay down, take off your pants, and lift your robes up." That sounded ambiguous. If anyone was passing by outside right now, they would probably misunderstand something. But, in truth, that was not what was going on at all. Tang Fan's physical aptitude was no stronger than Yin Yuanhua and the other two clerks. Riding a horse for however many days had been unbearable, but going in a carriage would have been even worse. Just look at how Yin Yuanhua had thrown up so badly and one would understand. In comparison, horseback riding hurt only the butt and the thighs, rather than the whole body. Concerning the right choice to make, as the highest leader of this expedition, Sir Tang had preferred to suffer a little, since he absolutely could not be like Yin Yuanhua, where all of his refinedness was swept to the floor. This was what was called living with hardship in order to die with dignity. His butt was fine, as the relatively thicker skin there had been unaffected by the bumps. The main problem was that his inner thighs had been incessantly chafed and jolted in the process of being on the horse, forming blisters that had bust open and bled afterwards. These injuries needed to have medicine applied to them. At the onset, Tang Fan had been too embarrassed to speak of them on account of his dignity, which had gone on until Suizhou had forced him to apply medicine to them. Changing his dressings every night had now become the thing Master Tang was most reluctant to do. If he had the choice, he would probably prefer to go have a friendly confrontation with the Lotos river gods than lie on his back, legs spread, pants off, robes lifted up to allow Suizhou to wrap the new gauze over the affected areas. Even though everyone was a man here that had what they should have and didn't have what they shouldn't, he was still uncomfortable, staring at the roof beams above his head and acting like his mind was wandering to cover up his own real embarrassment. Suizhou seemed to be able to see his internal thoughts. On the inside, he thought this was hilarious, but on the outside, he was as expressionless as ever. He looped the bandages around a few times, then glanced at the other's crotch with feigned insolence. "It's not a bad size," he said blandly. Ignore Tang Fan pretending to be dead, his attention was still entirely present. The instant the man's words entered his ears, he immediately went red, fuming. "How bold you are, to have the guts to nitpick the looks of an imperial ambassador. Do you want to die?" Suizhou gave a grunt. "I'm an ambassador, too. You're the deputy, I'm the leader. Don't talk crap, take your clothes off, and let this official comment on you myself. Are you sure you want to see?" "Of course I am." He had thought that Suizhou would find an excuse to refuse, but against expectations, the other promptly stood up and went to remove the belt from his pants without another word. Never mind," Tang Fan quickly said. "I know you're younger than me, so it wouldn't be good if your ego gets injured. All men want to save face, which I'll allow you to do this time around. It's all right. I don't mind." Suizhou genuinely only wanted to tease Tang Fan, he wasn't actually that stupid. Seeing that Sir Tang was on his way to puffing up his fur, he stopped, then brought the pastry dish over, picked up one piece and put it next to Tang Fan's lips himself. Beneath the dim candlelight, Tang Fan couldn't see how the sour jujube cake looked, but its taste was superb, both sweet and sour. It vaguely held the familiar flavor of how their old family cook made it when he was young. He couldn't resist rolling his tongue to sweep the remaining part into his mouth, accidentally brushing it against Suizhou's finger. The other paused, then took his hand back at rapid speed. Tang Fan didn't notice, narrowing his eyes at the sensation on his taste buds, nodding and giving more praise. "These pastries that Deputy Zhao picked out are pretty great. What a shame it is that this place is too unnatural. It'd be such a waste of good snacks, were we to need to run all over in the middle of the night." Suizhou told him to put his pants on and stand up, bending over to straighten out the bed sheets in the meantime. "Don't you think that something was not right here?" Tang Fan grabbed another piece of cake and put it into his mouth. "You noticed it, too. Don't eat too much, or you won't be able to sleep later," Suizhou said with a frown. "The old man appears to have an issue." Tang Fan nodded, wanting to say something, but because the cake had slid into his throat, he nearly choked himself to death. He couldn't help but stroke his neck as he looked elsewhere. Exasperated, Suizhou walked over and lightly pat him on the back, then passed him a teacup. "How have you managed to survive these past 20 years? The tea went down into Tang Fan's belly, the cake going along with it. He finally sighed in relief, laughing some. "I will surely be a scourge that lasts for 1,000 years. I believe the old man is suspicious, as well." He spoke incoherently, but it looked more like an act than anything else. Suizhou hummed, waiting for him to go on. "There are several possibilities. 1. He killed those people, though that really isn't a very high probability. I can't imagine why he would want to kill them for no reason, and aside from that, he's an aged and weak elder. It would be impossible for him to murder so many, unless he had help. It's just not doable. So, that possibility will be set aside for the time being. 2. He and maybe even the entire village, are colluding with the grave robbers, so they're doing all they can think of to mislead us and make us think more in the direction of the supernatural. Maybe the thieves promised to give the village some profits if they helped them keep the secret, after they robbed the royal tombs. Those that were killed all had discovered the secret and wanted to tell on them. After he slowly analyzed this, though, he shook his head in a snap. But that doesn't make a lot of sense, either. We have too few clues in hand right now. It'll be hard to guess the truth so quickly. There is another possibility, Suizhou said. Tang Fan looked at him. What the old man said is true. The other raised his brows. You believe in ghosts? Suizhou shook his head. It might not be ghosts, but something else. Regardless of whether the former village chief is actually mad or faking it, he's definitely hiding something from us and won't explain. Tang Fan smiled. Diplomacy over war. Looks like we need the Chenghua to head out. When it came to forcing confessions via interrogation, truly no one was better at it in the realm than the Chenghua. Many would think of all sorts of heinous methods once they heard the words forcing a confession, but in reality, there were many mundane methods that could make someone obediently tell the truth without torture, which were mostly used on officials that wouldn't tell the truth, yet could not be tortured. It was a secret of the Chenghua that they had passed on and shared to no one else. Now, one could be used as overkill to deal with an elder in a remote village. Let's rest first, then speak more on this tomorrow, Suizhou said. Right. It was already the time of the boar, 9 to 11 p.m., so they ought to go to sleep. It was quiet outside, not even the sounds of chickens and dogs to be heard. Everything living had presumably entered sleep. To say that it was completely silent would be wrong though. The nearby Luo River raced day and night, the river's rush forth causing the sound of flowing water to always fill their ears. The noise didn't feel like much once one got used to it, instead seeming to cleanse all the disordered ears of the heart. The space on the Kong wasn't too narrow, being more than enough for two to sleep on. Tang Fan slept inside, Suizhou on the outside. They had lived under the same roof for a long time, yet had never slept next to each other like this. Suizhou heard the sound of Tang Fan turning over, then said, "Turn back around." Tang Fan didn't ask why, compliantly turning his back towards him. He felt his chin get held by a warm palm, while Suizhou's other hand slowly pressed on some acupoints on the back of his skull. The tense feelings around his head gradually loosened, making him groan in comfort. By the just right force of the one behind him, he felt exhaustion accompanied by bursts of surging drowsiness, and quickly entered dreamland. Following midnight, he had an odd dream. In it, he was walking on the shore of a black river, many burial mounds standing unevenly on the distant, open plains. The wind whizzed past, the partnering sound of weeping drifting over from far away, bleak and shrill, as if it held endless sorrow and hatred as it curled over the plains, then bored itself into Tang Fan's ears, making him shudder in fear. The crying got closer and closer and closer and closer. All of a sudden, there seemed to be something behind him. The emotion he felt was indescribable. He only knew that he had never been this terrified before. He slowly turned his head. And did a full-body jolt, abruptly opening his eyes. "Don't move," Suizhou whispered in his ear, arm put right across the other's waist. Upon hearing his voice, Tang Fan's heart that was beating madly from the nightmare gradually quelled. However, he soon realized that the ethereal wailing that had caused him all over unease had not been in his dream at all, but was coming straight in from outside. End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 62. Lacking in brain. At first, it sounded like it was a woman crying, but upon listening carefully, it wasn't just one woman crying but the wailing of countless women accompanied by the gurgling of the flowing water from not far away. They might have come across something extremely painful, or perhaps had undergone something so tragic that they mourned, hated, and cursed out of powerlessness. Such emotions were revealed from their wails, making them even more prominently somber in the night. However, it was so late in the night and all the villagers had long since fallen asleep. Outside, there were only crops apart from the two imperial tombs. How could there be women crying out there? This sound was clearly not human. Prior to hearing the wailing himself, Tang Fan had believed that the description of the old village chief and the others were rather exaggerated until this moment when he had come to experience the feeling himself. Embodying deeply felt bitterness and anguish, the crying was sometimes sharp and high-pitched, but sometimes cold and low-pitched, like a knife gouging deep into flesh and bone. It was not a noise a normal human could have ever made. It caused one's hairs to stand on end even if they tried to suppress it. The wind seemed to be particularly strong tonight, as it made the doors and windows rattle, the wails continuing to blow alongside the non-stop sound of the wind. Tang Fan had since calmed down. This was not merely due to Suizhou being next to him but because his cool-headed disposition normally inherent to him had returned. It was precisely from relying on this personality of his that he had once traveled all by himself, studied as he toured all over the place, and undergone countless dangers until he at last turned it around into peace. He kept listening for a little bit, then turned his head to the side to whisper in close to Suizhou's ear. "Want to go out and investigate?" Grave looking, the other nodded and they began to get up and get dressed. Because it was windy at night here and they were not at their own home, they had only taken off their outer robes to sleep. This made it easy to put them back on and get tidied up in the blink of an eye. Suizhou's actions were a little quicker, so he was the one to push open the door. The wind outside was strong, even raising the water level. When paired with the sound of the rushing river, the crying noise was not as crystal clear as it had been before, but Tang Fan knew that this was just an illusion. The crying was always there. He looked up to survey the scene from up on high, attempting to identify the source of the sound. It was outside of his expectations. He had thought that the sound would come from the riverside, because based on either the information obtained from the old village chief or the statements of Magistrate He and the others, there seemed to be something extremely horrifying hidden beneath the Luo River that caused people to be pulled into it over and over again. Now, though, it sounded like it was coming from the direction of the eternal deep. Were there people actually trying to pretend to be ghosts? Tang Fan and Suizhou exchanged a look. They noticed that in the neighboring few homes, some other figures were also coming out from within and approaching them. It was Peng Qi and the rest of the Jinyue. The villagers certainly wouldn't dare to come out and look out of curiosity, to say nothing of Yin Yuanhua, Deputy Zhao, and the rest of them. Even if they did hear it, they would act like they hadn't. What a real coincidence this was. Yesterday, Magistrate He had said that the noise would not be heard every night, yet it had reappeared the very night they were resting here. Peng Qi waited for all the Jinyue to come in close, then quietly asked Suizhou, "Do you want to go check it out, brother?" Despite the sound being a good deal away from them, everyone still subconsciously quieted their steps and voices. Suizhou nodded, then took the lead in heading to the imperial tombs. The others naturally followed after him. As stated earlier, Luo River Village had been built bordering the Eternal Deep Tomb. This had been to make it easier for the villagers to defend the tombs, and they used to have no displeasure with this. After all, this didn't hinder farming work, and emperors being buried here showed that it was an area with good feng shui. Everyone had been honored. Yet, all those thoughts had completely changed 1 year ago. Everyone that lived near these tombs had to hear ghostly wailing at night and have river gods snatching people up, which scared them all to death. Thus, when Tang Fan's group had come here in the night, they had felt that the looks of fear on all of the villagers' faces were just them being ignorant, and it was only after hearing the sound with their own ears that they realized that those reactions were actually totally normal. It was unclear if it was the suspicions of a haunting inside their heads or what, but everyone believed that the closer they got to the tombs, the more horribly windy it was. Even Peng Qi, a highly skilled and brave Jinyue that normally knew no laws nor gods, shivered a little. That grieving, resentful sound was drawn out without end, going on and on like it had no need to breathe. The nearer they came, the surer they were that this wasn't something any human could make. Was it terrible that it wasn't human? Well, what most feared was an existence of something that was beyond one's understanding. Few people in the world genuinely believed that nothing supernatural existed at all. Even scholars that had studied the sacred sages feared saying such. Incense burning, sacrifices and the worship of gods had long been set in deep inside the hearts of the great Ming's people, and no matter how fearless one was, they would at least give distant respect to the supernatural, rather than not believe in it at all. Tang Fan would never admit to the existence of such things of his own volition, but he would also never deny that they did exist. As he saw it, humans walked the path of humans, ghosts walked the path of ghosts, and the heavens walked the path of the heavens. Whether they existed or not, none could deviate from their own paths by committing murder, arson, or any sort of harm unto others. Like this time, for example. Plundering imperial tombs and taking lives were both crimes, so regardless of if they had been committed by humans or ghosts, they needed to be repaid and penalized. That was what he persevered towards. For that reason, even as a civil official with no martial arts or weapons to defend himself with, he was no more as apprehensive as the Chenghua who was with him when that weird and inexplicable voice came closer with every step. On the contrary, he was as calm and self-assured as always. The leader of a team didn't need unrivaled martial arts but have to be capable of calming people's hearts at the very least. Such was what Tang Fan did. Pang Qi and the other Chenghua were a bit uneasy at the start, tightly gripping the hilts of their spring-gilt sabers, yet upon seeing that their leaders were so collected, they seemed to be influenced by that and had also slowly settled down. As their environment was all short hills and level plains extending far off, there were no mountain to obstruct their view of the wide field of. The moon quietly dug half of its surface out from the cloud cover, spilling moonlight between the ruins and broken tiles of the open plains, adding to sorrow of desolation. Not far away, the mausoleum of eternal deep stood silently before them, weeds overgrowing on it. It no longer had the majesty it once did. Yingzong of the Song Dynasty, who was buried within it, had not only had a short life but was also quite unlucky after his death. His crypt had caught fire in the early period of the Southern Song Dynasty, roasting the upper and lower layers of the tomb into a mess. What was even worse was that because one official that had participated in his funeral arrangements had also written down the layout of Yingzong's crypt in details in his own book, that reference material had turned into a figurative scripture for later generations of cultured grave robbers. Many had run off to excavate eternal deep in accordance with what had been written, digging holes every which way in it. Who knew how many treasures it even had left? Since his teacher was so knowledgeable, Tang Fan had also read that book, thus having some reasonable understanding of eternal deep. Seeing this imperial tomb from a former dynasty that was paired with the mournful wailing in his ears, ruefulness automatically welled up within him. He thought, what had been the point of fixing this tomb back up so beautifully? After 100 years, all emperors, princes, generals, and ministers would be nothing but more than handfuls of yellow soil. Finding a random place where they could have buried would have been better than what was going on right now, where they couldn't rest even in death. But, that sort of thinking was a bit ignominious, so he merely thought this, never to out loud say it. The issue at hand was that the closer they got, the more distinct that ghostly wailing became. There was a taut string in everyone's hearts as they feared that something would suddenly happen, the psychological pressure on them so great, it was disastrous. Only Master Tang alone was thinking of these wayward thoughts. It was really hard to say whether it was because he was carefree at heart or lacking in brain. All around the mausoleum was wide open areas, with nowhere for anyone to hide. The crying came from behind it. They slowly came forward, detoring the already run-down tomb. All of a sudden, Suizhou, who was in the very front, stopped. Everyone was caught off guard. Those behind him tensed, nearly drawing their sabers. They all quickly understood why he had done so, though. Right before them, there was still nobody to be seen, just the wildly overgrown vegetation that chaotically danced like ghosts in the wind. The sound came from a dark hole at the foot of the mausoleum. It was an inconspicuous robber's cave. Only the noise's existence had caused them to even notice it. The sound was as mournful as always, like those women that were confined deep within the palace all their lives, unwilling to fade with age, unwilling to exhaust their youth there, and also like those people that had suffered the apex of injustice and torture unto their deaths, unwilling to have their souls vanish, remaining thereafter with regrets, full of endless hatred as they stubbornly refused to pass on. If what had been heard back in the houses had merely been a hidden grudge carried over with the wind, then upon arriving here, one could feel a bone-deep animosity that had been amplified 10 or even 100 times. As if it could be morphed into real substance, it would pounce at them, engulfing all of their bodies and souls. Though premonitions had long been had, once everyone saw this 3-square chi hole that could only accommodate one stooping person passing through it at a time, they felt that penetrating chill. This was not a face-off against some evil thief or traitor. Their present situation could not be explained using any sort of common sense. Whenever one confronted circumstances like this, their first reaction would inevitably be to feel helpless. Right before coming around the mausoleum, Peng Qi and the Jinyue had been walking a step ahead of Suizhou and Tang Fan, ready to deal with unfathomable dangers at any time. Even with the sabers grasped in their hands, they still felt unsteadied, hearts drumming, and had to turn to look back. They quickly noticed Tang Fan and Suizhou standing in place. The former came a few steps forward and took a measure of the scene, while the latter followed him with the same collected expression as ever. The Jinyue couldn't help but feel ashamed, hurriedly forcing themselves to calm down. Once logic was restored, courage would return, as well. Peng Qi took a few steps forward, preventing Tang Fan from going any further ahead. "Sir, the situation is unclear, so you mustn't take unnecessary risks. It would be better to wait until after daybreak." Before he got to finish speaking, something happened as he registered the look of surprise on Tang Fan's face. He couldn't help but put his words on hold to follow the other's line of sight, whereupon he saw that a hand was reaching out of the hole. "Get back," he shouted loudly. Everyone that was escorting the two leaders recoiled a few steps, but their eyes were fixed on the cave entrance. First came a hand, followed by a head. What was visible right now was definitely not as clear as it would have been at daytime, but from the outline of the man's outfit, they could tell that he was wearing rough, completely disheveled clothing. "Halt! Who are you?" The Jinyue's shout did not deter him, and soon, his upper body crawled out of the cave. He used both arms and legs, but was completely panicked, like something was chasing after him. Hearing what the Jinyue said, he instead raised his head. They all had since adapted to being in the dark. By the faint moonlight, they saw that something had gouged out one of his eyeballs, yet had not severed it completely, leaving it hanging on his face. His nose had also been bitten half off, face bloodied and horrifying to look at. When he caught sight of them, his facial expression contorted for a while, as if he wanted to say something. Heaving sounds came out of his mouth, but as soon as he opened it, blood raced out, bits of viscera-like meat coming with it. Despite this, his limbs kept him desperately crawling out of there. This was a horribly terrifying scene. Tang Fan would even dare to promise that if Yin Yuan Hu had been here and seen this, he wouldn't want to eat any meat for 3 years. No need to bring him up, though, as even these mentally strong Jinyue who were accustomed to seeing the tortures at the imperial prison felt faint at this very moment. This was not a torture in the imperial prison, but a lone person suddenly crawling out of a robber's cave in the wilderness, his facial features almost half gone. Where would their minds all head? There had to be an even more horrid creature in there, to make someone become like this. The man finally climbed out on all fours. He appeared to want to ask them for help, but with an unknown foe and a lack of clear understanding as to what he had encountered, why would the Jinyue ever come forward so easily? They rather commanded him to stop, not allowing him from moving further. However, he had long since lost his reason. The second he saw people, it was like he had been granted great amnesty. Regardless of whether they were soldiers or friends, he staggered right towards them, disregarding their shouts. Many Chenghua had drawn their sabers, ready to strike him when he threw himself at them. Yet, the man had spit up too much blood, and could no longer hold his body up. After no more than a few steps, he stumbled and fell to the ground, unable to get back up. Right then, a Chenghua shouted, "Someone else is coming out." Everyone looked over at the sound. Sure enough, another figure was crawling out from within, shouting as he did so. "Help! Help! Who is it?" a Chenghua shouted. The other cared about not a thing else, as once he heard someone answer, he shouted even louder. "Help! Help me!" His voice abruptly cut off. Beneath the moonlight, Tang Fan saw his eyes widen until they were wide circles, and then his hand that hung in the air suddenly land heavily in the mud. Sui Zhou took a few steps forwards. While everyone else reacted too late, he reached out, grabbed the other's shoulder, and lifted him up. They all gasped, because what he had hauled up was only someone's mutilated upper half body. As for his lower half, it was empty, dripping with blood. Who knew where it had gone to? Judging from his recent ability to call for help that had turned into him encountering sudden and instant calamity, there was obviously something inside the cave that had just bitten his lower half off. He's not dead yet. Peng Xi had crouched down to check on the man that had first run out, his hand over that nose whose original shape could no longer be distinguished. There's still some breathing. Tang Fan also crouched down. "What did you all come across down there?" he asked the man. The other's remaining eye slightly shifted, his mouth opening into a small curve like he wanted to speak, yet couldn't do so clearly. Tang Fan had to bow his head to get his ear in close. Then, he heard him saying, "Monster, help, help me." Right after the me fell out, there was no more. Tang Fan looked at Peng Xi, who shook his head. "We can't help him." "The sound is gone," Sui Zhou suddenly said. Everyone startled, then realized, that constant, bizarre sound that could make one's hairs stand on end was, indeed, gone. Where it had come from was unknown, and when it had ended was similarly unknown. It had come and gone without a trace, completely unpredictable. The only two people who had known the truth were dead, and died miserably so. Based on how they had been acting prior to their death, they ought to have experienced an abnormal event. There might actually be something equally abnormal lurking in the cave. Tang Fan and Sui Zhou exchanged a look. They both felt that this matter was utterly tricky. They had been thinking that this would only be a typical tomb raiding case accompanied by the ignorance of local commoners, who had made up a false narrative about river gods and whatnot. As long as they came over here and arrested the thieves and exposed their deceptions, everything would be solved like a knife through bamboo. Now, however, it seemed that the complexity of this far exceeded their original expectations. "Sir, what should be done now?" Peng Xi asked. Tang Fan glanced at the two bodies. "We'll take this intact corpse back to the village first, and talk more on it tomorrow." Their group quickly returned. The village was still silent. Their footsteps would occasionally alarm dogs outside of homes, caused them to bark a few times. Following the strange wailing's disappearance, the village looked to be more peaceful, no longer as eerie as it had seemed before. As was evident, one's mood affected how they perceived their environment, everything being inner demons acting up. Tang Fan and Sui Zhou returned to their house. They hadn't felt it right then, but now that their minds were relaxing, they noticed that they were awfully parched. Tang Fan sneezed, then discovered that he had broken out into a sweat when he was outside. As a result of getting blown on by the wind and going from cold to hot, he felt that his back now was still a bit soaked. Sui Zhou touched the teapot. The tea inside it had long gone cold, which was natural since they had already fallen asleep, got startled awake, went for a trip to Eternal Deep, and then returning had taken over 2 Shishan. Dawn was going to break soon. Having been so busy this night, no one could sleep well. Even the thought of going to bed immediately was an impossibility. As the second Tang Fan shut his eyes, he could see the face of the man missing an eyeball swaying before him. Sui Zhou took the teapot and went to the back kitchen to heat the water. Not long after, he brought steaming hot tea over. The snacks on the table didn't need to be heated and could be eaten as it is. Tang Fan patted his stomach at last with 2 pieces of cake. Seeing that Sui Zhou had sat down but wasn't moving, he pushed the plate towards him. "You should eat, too." Sui Zhou picked up a piece of Osmanthus cake, yet didn't put it in his mouth. "How do you intend to handle this incident?" he instead asked. Tang Fan shook his head. "There's no good way to go about it with just us. There's absolutely something in there and the old village chief is likely to know what it is. He'll need to be questioned again tomorrow. If there's still no results then, that cave will need to be filled in, after which I'll present a memorial of failure that says that this case is much too dangerous. The court will need to send more people in order to figure out what it is that's down there and slowly plan things out. This was the safest route forward, to stop the Jinyue from being put into danger. Were the superior here to be switched out for Yin Yuanhua, he would have probably just insisted on making them go into the cave, giving no room for argument. Sui Zhou knew that when it came to how Tang Fan conducted himself, he would absolutely never endanger the lives of others in order to make progress in his own official's career. But, if things kept developing like this, they wouldn't get to decide what happens here. Many villagers had died, alarming everyone. If the monster couldn't be captured so that this place could return to its old peacefulness, there would come a time where the villagers would make live human sacrifices to the river gods, resulting in the continued loss of life. If Tang Fan reported this explanation to the court, it might not condemn him on its end, but it would certainly take this as him being incompetent and was making excuses to shirk his duties. Then they would send an imperial ambassador of an even higher rank, making their own group seem passive. Sui Zhou understood this point very well. When the time comes, I'll have Pang Qi go to the Northern Administrative Court Division's Henan Guard post to borrow hand cannons. After another group were sent over here, we should be able to go down and check things out. Tang Fan looked contemplative, mindfully immersed in reflection, but that didn't at all prevent him from picking up cake pieces and delivering them to his mouth, one after the other. How he looked while handling serious business, yet still not neglecting to eat, was quite ridiculous to see. Sui Zhou watched this with a smile, but the man in question didn't notice at all, still earnestly considering the feasibility of the hand cannon proposal. "That's possible, but we still need to take time making a decision." Before he finished speaking, he noticed that the corners of Sui Zhou's mouth were slightly raised up. "What?" he asked, confused. "Nothing." Sui Zhou curled a fist, brought it up to his lips and lightly coughed and arranged his facial expression into its usual cold one. "Don't eat too much. Someone is definitely going to be bringing breakfast at daybreak. Let's rest for a bit or we'll lack in energy during the day." They hastily tidied up. This time, they didn't even take off their outer robes, laying down right in their clothes. Tang Fan had thought that he wouldn't be able to sleep, but because he was truly too tired, he dozed off not too long afterwards, unaware of how long the night was. By the time Sui Zhou called him awake, he didn't dream again. When he opened his eyes once more, it was already bright out and steaming congee with side dishes were placed on the table. He had chugged down a full belly of tea last night that hadn't filled him, so now that he was seeing these simple but appetizing pickled vegetables, his appetite was provoked. After he finished getting up and freshening up, he sat with Sui Zhou at the table and began to eat. "County Deputy Zhao is waiting outside. I told him to go with Pang Qi to the old village chief's house and bring him over," Sui Zhou said. Tang Fan hummed. Questioning him in the village wouldn't be convenient, bring him back to the county capital. "You all can do as you see fit." Leave half of your personnel with me, because I want to take a walk around the village. The origins of those two from last night. He didn't get to finish, as the door was banged open from outside. Sir! Sir! Deputy Zhao appeared in the doorway, pale-faced and panting. It's terrible. Upon seeing him in that state, Tang Fan's heart sank. What is it? Don't pant so heavily, finish your words in one breath. The old village chief is dead. End chapter.